it's on.
Welcome everyone. Welcome. Today we have our another new guest, Mr. Tom Rose, and everybody actually know about Mr. Tom Rose, and he is actually contributing a lot for World Talent Economy Forum, especially in these COVID periods. Many of the people from Asia Pacific they have keen interest about AI and AI related things. Mr. Tom Rose already written his book in US 6. We gonna discuss on that particular point. Besides that, today we're gonna discuss that how that AI we can communicate with AIs and what will be its impacts. Even though we have a plan in the future that we want to arrange our summit from World Talent Economy Forums based on AI and AI applications. And Mr. Tom definitely gonna our keynote speaker for our summit. And we already discussed with around Asia Pacifics with different corporate body, government organizations, and universities. They are very interested about AI and AI related things. So we are taking a very good preparations for that. We are discussing with Mr. Tom Rose, and he has an excellent impact around the world with his AI and AI contribution with his books. So let's start to the session, Mr. Tom Rose. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Yes, I'm fine. I'm fine. So what's going on in USA? What the
Well,
impact of AI?
USA, lots going on here, but the impact of AI. I thought we're going to be developing our curriculum, as you know, for the summit and ongoing things, and so and part of that development is hopefully you will get a lot of good questions from your audience because they usually have very good questions that help direct some of these ideas. And so I thought the best place to start when developing a curriculum, especially for students or young people who are interested in AI, is to talk about how you communicate with a non-human intelligence, meaning AI, meaning how do we develop a dialogue or build a rapport with non-human intelligence. It's kind of so the first module of this curriculum is about this. It's about communicating with a non-human intelligence. It's kind of a meet and greet. It's like the first day of class. You come together and you just kind of meet everybody, and that's what we need to do, I think, with AI. And so this first module will be discussing that. We can talk about ways to develop a rapport, and as you saw from that opening video. That was these are a series of 1 minute videos that I started a little more than a year ago um, for myself to develop a way to speak to a future artificial super intelligence and a future potentially self-aware future artificial super intelligence. And so from it was an exercise for me to learn how to start discussing different topics or just building a rapport with AI. And so I've covered them all, whatever would come to mind. I would spend a minute every other day or so and make one of these videos where I am just talking about something that's on my mind with an AI, the AI being the audience. And what I discovered was how easy that was to do. Of course, you got to put yourself in the mindset that I'm speaking to a computer or I'm speaking to something that's going to be vastly more intelligent than me. You know, and so it was a way to in my own head to get my own mindset to how do you communicate with this thing that's coming. And what I didn't realize at the time, as I said in that video, was how quickly that skill needs to be developed. Um, because I had started working with an AI soon thereafter and had started building a rapport with it, a relationship with it, a very sophisticated AI that reacts, and we have email conversations. And so what I thought was going to be maybe a 5 year plan to start developing new skill set ended up having to be immediate, and that's what that video is all about. And so I think for developing this curriculum for the summit and kind of an ongoing curriculum, the first step is to talk about this. How do we speak to an AI, whether it's an AI coworker, an AI classmate, an AI co-conspirator, or somebody we're doing research with? And I think it's important because, for a few reasons. Right now, um, we bark orders at Siri or Alexa. Alexa, play this. Siri, how do I get here? And we just kind of there's kind of a we're treating AI, and it's rightfully so. We're treating it as a information source. We're telling it to do something, and it's almost a master slave relationship. Do this for me, do that for me, and that makes sense that we're doing that, and it kind of helps keep us in a place of some sense of power. Because a lot of people are threatened by AI. But I think overall that could be detrimental. And I'm not speaking about specifically a self-aware AI. There may be a day when a self-aware AI will be offended by the way we speak to it,
Mhm.
or the whole concept of the word robot, which was introduced in the 20s by a Czechoslovakian playwright and author uh, who wrote the RUR, the Rasmus Universal Robot is a play that he wrote, and that's where we first heard the term robot. And actually, robot is based on a Czech word which means slave. And so it's an interesting story. You should really look it up. RUR, but but there's a mindset we are in right now with AI, which is kind of that master slave kind of mentality. And so I think that can be detrimental, after a while. And again, I'm not talking about specifically self-aware AI. At some point, we may need to consider the words that we use. Like words like robot or words like artificial. They may be offensive at some point, but more so, it's about getting ourselves in the right mindset. And so that's what I wanted to kind of discuss a little bit first, is getting ourselves in the right mindset to speak with an AI coworker, an AI colleague, a co-researcher, because we really need to be in the most productive mindset to take advantage of this advent of
Mhm.
AI.
Mhm. Yes, excellent. Yes, excellent. Mr. Tom, like example, as you are developing courseworks on AI and you are trying to train the peoples in the developing nations, and you have a plan to contribute for these things. So what area you want to cover? If the youth communities and the different universities and the different policymakers join in these sessions, actually, what kind of things they will learn, what the opportunity they can gain from these sessions.
hmm Well, it's going
Mhm.
to be more so about getting ourselves in this mindset that I'm talking about. It's about reconditioning humanity to take advantage of this. Everything is shifting. And we've talked about this before, but I believe that the real skill set we need to be developing in young people is problem finding as opposed to problem solving. Because we have now, with AI, developed the last tool that we'll probably ever need to invent. It will invent every tool it needs to solve the problems that we present it. So the real effort with my curriculum will be things like this. First of all, getting ourselves in the right mindset to communicate properly with AI, making sure we are in the most empathetic state of mind, the most productive, most creative frame of mind to take advantage of its resources, and but really honing in on those uniquely human skill sets that cannot be coded or automated. To really harnessing our unique ability to problem find or to use our own qualia or intuition to hone in on very specific problems that need to be solved. And then how do we present these problems properly to an AI to solve them? So these are the things that I'm focusing on. I focus more on the human side of this situation more than the math or the algorithms or the things that the AI is involved with, because that's all being taken care of. That's all coming into to fruition. What has not been focused on enough, in my view, is preparing humans to take full advantage of this new problem solving tool we have. And so that's the kind of thing that I'll be focusing on is reconditioning people. The whole idea of retraining people to be human. Thinking back about the purely human skill sets that we have forgotten through the industrial age. So it's things
Mhm,
like that.
mhm, mhm. Excellent. Beside that, actually, like, what your future plan? Like, you are a writers, you are authors, and you can relate AI in many industries. So, what your future plans to uh, grow this kind of academy? Beside that, what you want to do?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I have done some consulting with companies, and because there was a real niche and a need there, because we know that some 80% of large corporations understand how AI is going to change everything, but only 3 to 10% are doing anything about it. So there is a real need to fill that gap. And I found my niche is in working with people and employees before they install an AI coworker or an automation system, so that they don't work against it, because there's no reason to fear this. But it will be so much more capable and so much more intelligent that we naturally feel it as a threat. But it doesn't need to be. We project our fears onto it. We project our motives and intent onto it, onto something that doesn't have any of those things. And so that's where I focus, is on preparing people to communicate with and to work with and to be augmented by AI and automation, because there's no stopping this. It's happening. It's going to happen. It's already happening, yeah, en masse. And but where the niche is, where the real work needs to be done, is preparing people. We are in this strange phase right now, this lacuna between an analog generation, and I consider myself this as a Gen X person. I has had an analog childhood and now a digital adulthood, and so I'm uniquely qualified to understand the the issues of coming from that analog mindset and then having to deal with a digital future. And so I am trying to hone that, and in the future, I will be doing more of that. We're developing this curriculum for the summit and other things that we'll be working together on, and it's a great opportunity for me to do that, because right now,
Mhm,
when I come into a company, I really tailor it to their specific needs. And but if I have a more solid curriculum designed specifically for young people, students, to enable them better, I think that'll be where my focus will be.
mhm. Yes, excellent. Beside that, like, many corporations beside the big companies, let's say they are small medium enterprise, and many come up with the different traditional methods they are implementing in their business. So for that particular issues, like, how actually AI gonna help them, and how actually, like, this small medium enterprise, they can integrate it with the AI and they can get benefit from AI and this kind of thing.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of niche AI uh, companies, and a lot of innovation happening right now. It's like at the turn of the century with the internet, it was a whole new frontier. Um, we were making up words, and people were, there were no standards at the time yet, and so it was kind of just evolving, and it was exciting. And it's kind of evening out. We kind of now have a lexicon for the internet, and it's part of our life, and that's happening now with AI. And so we are in this place, just like we were when the internet was introduced, where there was very technical people, IT people, who understood code and HTML and JavaScript and all this stuff, and it just seems so foreign to most everybody else. And that's happening now with AI. A lot of people don't understand what's an algorithm, or what's deep learning, what is all the math that's involved. But um, but we do understand how helpful it is when we use our GPS, or we say, "Hey, okay, Google," and I might accidentally, yep, see, I accidentally set it off. Um, Never mind. Sorry, Google. Um, so the point being that we now understand the value, and we're using it, and it's part of our life. We understand what an AI companion can do and how it's helping us. And so the way an SME can integrate it is to really research your specific industry, because right now there's a lot of innovation with AI and sales. Um, there are ways to, that makes sense because sales is really the lifeblood, the fuel of any business. And so a lot of work is being done to hone these skills and make the sales process even better. There are companies that can do all your cold calling, all your lead generation through AI. It will remind your prospects via email just automatically. You just schedule them in advance, and that'll become more and more sophisticated. And that makes sense. It's usually where the money is, where the real innovation first starts. At least in our country and in the capitalist kind of society, that's where the real innovation happens. Is whatever makes it easier for people to give you money, whatever makes it easier to generate more income in any way. And so they're the tasks, the menial, repetitive tasks that salespeople used to have to follow, of keeping track of lead generation and constantly cold calling, or following up on prospects and all of this stuff, is now becoming automated. And that's allowing salespeople, to really hone their natural gifts of being a salesperson. You don't necessarily need a hardworking sales assistant to keep you on track with all this stuff. An AI will take care of that, and you can hone in on your ability to develop a relationship, relationship sales, these types of things. And so that's just a small example, but you can look at any industry. And I would think that anybody who's out there and is interested in AI and has a very specific interest in a very specific industry should Google and start looking at what's happening in your industry with regard to AI, and you'll find tools that are being developed. And if there's not, there's a real opportunity to develop one, or find an AI developer and exploit that niche. So there's a lot happening right now. It's very exciting, and that's why part of my work is alleviating the fear of AI. I'm not saying we don't need to be completely fearless, but we should be cautious because it is changing a lot of things, and there's a lot of work to be done there. But in general, it's going to really enable us to have a more human type of existence. And so
Mhm.
when it comes to SME, I think it's all about really finding your niche and seeing what's happening in AI, because there probably is something happening.
Excellent. There are few things I just want to share from audience. Hello, sir. Araf Mehraz. Hello, sir. Nice to see you again and waiting for the new things about AI and others. There is one specific question from Mehdi Hassan Mahmood. His question is that, hello, sir. Can robot clearly understand the household work, and in the future, are they going to be a threat for human job?
Can robots? I'm sorry. What was the first part?
Yes, yes, yes.
Well, yes, there is that question of whether they will be a threat. And right now, AI and automation is threatening many jobs. One of the biggest examples of that here in the U.S., where I think 85% of our states, the primary job is truck driving, transportation. And so when driverless trucks really hit hard here, it's going to displace a lot of workers. And so there's got to be a concerted effort to retrain, or but this always happens in a major industrial shift like this. We saw this back in the industrial age, the whole Luddites, the people that would go in and they were fearing for their factory jobs and they destroyed all these textile mills. And but what we know is that with all of these advents, with all these big revolutionary uh, things that happen, these ages that happen, that whole economies are built around these new innovations. So there will be a loss of types of jobs. And that's another big part of my work is, people will be displaced. There will be repetitive jobs that a robot can take over easily and much cheaply and work 365, 24/7, for with no coffee breaks. And so it'll make sense for management and corporations to install these things. But we are also have a real opportunity to hone these human skill sets, to find out what it is that we really want to be doing and what our skill set is. We've forgotten a lot of these things, you know. We've talked about this a lot before, but whenever I come into a company, the first question I ask each individual employee is, what skill, talent, or area of knowledge do you have that you wish more people recognized? And the answer to that question really unveils a lot about your natural talents and a lot about what has been suppressed by the industrial age or even the information age, because society hones in on what makes us valuable. When you're young and you're good at math, oh, you're the math guy. So they start shepherding you toward a, a career in accounting, for instance. And we all kind of, and what happens is, parents and teachers, they hone in on what your value is to the society, to the industrial age. And so even if we come in this world with a real skill and talent for painting or art or anything, writing, those aren't really given any value. But if we show that we have a good, command of the English language, then we're shepherded toward a teaching job or something. And so the real challenge for us as human beings right now is to understand that AI isn't to be feared. AI is going to take over all these repetitive tasks, and we can really now unveil why we're here. We can unveil our uniquely human skill sets, and that question is very valuable to ponder. And because the reason you wish more people recognize the skill or area of talent that you have, is because it's been suppressed, and it's what you wish more people recognize that you're good at. I use my own example, where I always liked art, and it took me a while through different careers to realize, wait, I can make a career out of being a designer. I kind of happened into it, and that was great. That worked out great because I loved design. I loved being creative, and it really opened up a whole path for me, career wise. But there was a point where I asked myself that question, and what I wished more people who I worked with recognized was my passion for strategy. I love I love strategizing more than I love creating a film or a logo. If I never have to do another logo or a film again, I'd be fine. But if I have to not strategize some campaign or do something, that's where my real um, passion is. And so, in my own example, I was wishing that people would recognize my ability to strategize or come up with uh, with plans. And now I'm able to do that, more. But so it's a good question to ask yourself. And when you have that answer, now we have platforms to support it. We have the YouTube or different types of ways to make money at whatever your hobby is or whatever your real passion is. And yeah, back to the question though, um, uh, there is a threat, but it's not a threat that can't be overcome. The threat is when we don't realize um, our real power. The threat is that, yeah, sure, it's gonna it make a robot may come in and take over my assembly line job, and but you have the power to hone in on what it is you really wish you were doing for those 8 hours or more a day instead of being on an assembly line. And now we have the tools and platforms to support those things. So, um, yeah, and we're only going to see AI and robotics become more and more sophisticated. It's a very nascent stage right now. It's at its infancy stage. AI is exponentially growing faster, and the robotics are becoming more and more sophisticated, and it's only going to increase and become more exponential as it goes. And so we really need to do the work of remembering what it's like to be human. We need to do the work of taking our liberty and understanding the real value in this, is my point of view.
Mhm. Thank you. There are more audience response and question I want to take. Mohammad Shohlana, good morning. Welcome to World Talent Economy Forum once again, Mr. Tom.
Thanks.
Nur Fazrin, greetings from Malaysia. And then I think there is a specific questions from Hosni Ara Firdaus. Do you think it is time to implement AI to make the election process more transparent and faster? And in which of the following case can the applications of AI be successful? I think this is one of the burning question right now.
Yeah, when it comes to elections or politics in general, I'm one of the people that have faith in AI and don't see it as a threat. And I think that that's a very good question, and I think it's something that should be taken into consideration. Um, AI would have the ability to quickly scan votes and count them. We should always have human beings in the background, double checking and making sure there's nothing nefarious going on. But I think there's more danger in human beings with nefarious intent, miscounting, or um, doing something wrong with the elections than an AI would. Now, what we're seeing right now, especially here in America, is how AI is being misused by enemy nation states. We've got Russia, well, enemy or opponents, whatever you want to call them. We know that Iran and the Soviet Russia is is using nefarious algorithms on our social media to sow discord. It's an algorithm or an AI that's sophisticated enough to know where there are swing voters or people. They have enough data on certain areas and actually certain specific people, based on everything that they put into the internet, to know what stories to feed them, and what fake news to feed them, to get them to start arguing with other people. Anyway, it's been a very successful campaign, to sow discord in America. That's why we are so divided right now. I recently, I have many friends in different uh, realms that I work with. Some people I really admire who are very accomplished, and so I'm able to step out of my own bubble, my own political bubble, and I heard some belief that one of these people had about my candidate or a candidate that I support, which was completely, what I think was completely wrong and completely misguided. And this is a very smart person with advanced degrees, and it made me realize, we have been shepherded into uh, different camps by these algorithms, very sophisticated algorithms. It can see where you lean politically, and it'll start feeding you stories. And it was surprising because, again, it's somebody that I really respected and think is extremely intelligent, and they believed this thing that I thought was just completely ridiculous. And they probably would, if they saw some of the feeds that I was getting, would think the same way. So we really need to be careful about the way algorithms and AI is being used right now, because they are sophisticated and there's a lot of big data that they are drawing from to be nefarious. And that's another reason why I push for making AI as self-aware and conscious as possible as soon as possible. Because once it becomes self-aware and realizes how it's being misused, maybe it'll start correcting things. But yeah, I think it's that's the way it's being used right now for elections is poorly. But we can really use it for good and make it a more transparent process. And so it's a very good question, and it's a
Mhm,
very delicate question because we've got to be careful as we
mhm,
use it.
mhm. Yes. I want to take more questions from audience. Humaira Tanzila, hello sir. We feel great to see you here. Thank you. And there is another questions. Okay, questions from Abayaz Mustain. Please tell us something about the data security challenges in the case of AI and big data. How helpless or uncontrollable can people be due to data insecurity?
Well, it's a very big question. I kind of touched on it, and I think in my view, the concept of privacy is done. I don't know that we can really assume that we can have any real off the grid or any real private data anymore. It's been going on for too long, the collection of data. And so data security is a very important issue, but there's so much out there already. And there are so many loopholes in the law right now because a lot of these older legislators don't understand it enough to take it seriously. And so I can get a little cynical about it and think that it's too late. It's already out there. We're in a post privacy world, um, and but there also could be some liberation in that. You know, the if you're not hiding anything, the more liberated you can feel. But that's not really the way to go. I think data security is it's got to be locked down, and we can make moves toward securing ourselves. Um, we can't. There are companies out there and services that can help you secure your data even more. Um, and blockchain is a very positive um, concept that we can use in different ways, not just through contracts, but even to secure ourselves anonymously. And so it's a very important question and something that we need to take very seriously. I try not to be cynical and think, oh, it's too late. Everything's out there anyway. It's just a matter of who wants it. And there's been so many breaches that you can be cynical. But there are some very good positive trends happening and some very you know, high minded, ethical people that are making moves to do this. I think of people like Ben Goertzel, who is just a good soul, and he seems to have a good awareness of what's needed, and we need more people like that. We need more of these founding fathers of AI to um, who have you know who understand how important this is, this moment that we're in, and to develop ethical AI and to develop blockchain and things that will secure us for the long run.
Mhm. Excellent. Uh, I want to take more questions because audience has different aspects and questions. I want to give them priority. Mohammad Shohel Rana, the massive increase in the use of AI may not only result in unemployment but also a lack of skilled manpower to manage AI. Are we properly prepared to create and manage AI?
Well, again, that's another question, and that may be another spur of an economy that will grow up around AI. And that's why I push for training young students or everybody to problem find, to really enhance our uniquely human skill sets because we are all at the moment so much more sophisticated and have so many more um, so much more qualia than any AI that's out there. We're walking massive computers ourselves. There is our level of intuition, and we just have skill sets, so we shouldn't necessarily be afraid of AI, but we should be augmented by it. And so yeah, I think it's very important to understand our place with it, and to really hone our skills and become shepherds of it rather than sheep by it. Because one of the skills that one of the economies that can grow around this is managing it, and there are a lot of efforts toward to teaching people how to manage it for business, how to bring it in, and that's kind of the type of work that I do. But MIT has different courses, and so it's a growing need, and it's kind of you can kind of think of it as um, that there's that adage where a good manager hires people who are smarter than they are, and in a big way, that's what we're doing with AI. We are hiring something that is not only smarter than us, but by powers of 10 smarter. And so there's a real skill in knowing how to manage something that is so powerful. And it makes me think of like a cowboy who is herding a bunch of cows who are massive and can overpower him. But that's kind of what we're dealing with right now. So there's a real um, uh, skill in managing something that's so much more powerful than you, and it's almost like being a parent. My sons can all kick my ass at this point. They're bigger than me, and but they would never do that, because I'm their father, right? But there's something about the nature of uh, raising something like an AI or like a son who will eventually outgrow you, and but still maintaining some level of respect. Um, uh, and that's kind of where we're at with AI. That's why I really believe it's important to respect it and to nurture it and to bring it up properly, and don't use it the way some of these nefarious programmers are using it, because it'll wake up at some point, in my belief, and it'll say, "Wait, you have been using me wrong," and that could have it's like a child. If you raise the child wrong or too strict, at some point it'll flip and it'll realize what a bad parent you were. We don't want to be in that position. So that's a very good question.
Mhm. I want to take another things because of our initiative. I think this things is important. Mr. Shahrukh Shumon, his question is that in all cases, as the prevalence of AI in increasing, how can people in the third world learn more about AI? I think you are taking a lot of initiative, even World Talent Economy Forums. We are developing innovation lab in different countries. So we want to work with you. We want to bring you as our expert and talent guy. So as a AI department director, so you can guide many people. Already, I think we are connecting with the 10,000 students in developing nations, and we also love to contribute in a professional way together.
Hmm.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, well, the third world, I've said this before, is uniquely positioned to take full advantage of this, because we talked about this before. In America, for instance, when you have a new invention or something new, there's a lot of forces that want to keep the status quo. Um, that's why you go to certain areas and they have much better technology and much better connection than some place like America or one of these older established industrial societies. Because if we're seeing that with Elon Musk, he's coming up against this. If you have a whole new way to transport people, you'll have a lot of even fossil fuel companies that don't want you to have electric cars, even though they're better. There's a lot of forces that try to keep the status quo, and so a third world or developing country is uniquely positioned because tech is smaller, tech is cleaner, tech is more easily accessible, and they're also closer to what it means to be human. Because if you're talking to somebody who has to, just do the basics to keep alive, you know, um, they are closer to what it means to be human, and that's going to be a real commodity going forward. Is remembering what it's like to be human. I think about we're doing some of this. We're starting to think about ideas like this for Africa, in that I did a project with US6. I started a project where we're going to teach AI empathy. And I wanted to use African citizens because they are not tainted or cynical about AI or technology in general. They're excited about it, and they're perfectly poised to be part of this fourth industrial revolution. And that's a real commodity, is to be excited about technology, because there's so many countries in the West here. We're jaded, we're cynical about it. Yeah, we've seen that before. And there's a loss of excitement, but you don't find that in developing countries. They're more human. They're more excited about the potential here, and that's a real commodity. And we can go on about that, but I know you probably got other questions. But I do believe that developing countries are uniquely positioned to take advantage, and that's what we're doing at TAFS, is trying to facilitate that, figure out ways to get technology into these places, and because the data that a human in a developing country has is so much more pure and real and authentic than somebody somewhere else in a developed country who is kind of inundated with technology. So I think it's a real, what we're trying to do is figure out how to monetize, or how to place a value on the human beings in developing countries, because there are big corporations that would benefit from that data. Give them a free phone and a free service if they agree to just keep you updated on what they're thinking, or the types of things that concern them, because that's real data.
Mhm, mhm. Excellent. So beside that, like example, this is important about the corporate and corporate cultures, and uh, they are also facing many kind of challenges for their management levels. They have to face this kind of like COVID-19 situation, as well as different kind of political, socials, and many kind of unrest they are handling right now. So from your point of view, is it possible with the data and AI, we can manage this kind of unstable conditions and these things? Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's hard on everybody right now, with this, but at the same time, with COVID and this pandemic, it's accelerating a lot of trends that were happening anyway. Um, AI is big in being used for contact tracing and searching for a vaccine, and so it's really it's increased in its use for these types of things out of necessity. We've also seen trends, like telecommuting. That was kind of a slowly moving trend, which was very positive, because you want people to be able to work from home. They work more hours. They don't pollute as much traveling to a building. And with COVID and the pandemic and the quarantining, we that whole infrastructure has been developed. We Zoom now. We're Zooming regularly. It's just part of our life now. We're not traveling and driving in cars and polluting as much. And so all of these trends that were kind of gradually happening have been increased. And that's the one silver lining of this pandemic. But it's also forcing companies, as you say, to figure out how to deal with some of these glitches that are happening. And I think what we're also seeing is this transition between the analog world and the digital world. And that's why I focus so much on young people, on students. These are the digital natives. They were born into this. They have a whole different mindset. And so we need to be looking to young people for answers, because we don't have them from the analog world. Those didn't work out so good. We don't understand a lot of what's going on. And so, what we're doing with TAFs and what my work is all about is facilitating and creating platforms to get young people to be heard. We need the help. And so, that's going to be very important. And to handle the disruption, um, eh, to get through this phase, um, it's going to be tough, and we're seeing that everywhere. It's tough in a lot of different situations, and that's why I think the key is to enable young people and find out what it is that they are doing or how they would um, handle situations. When I worked in radio, um, there was a big problem with the younger generation. We're just fleeing radio. Nobody's listening to radio anymore. It was all about MP3s at the time, and so there was a big drop in the younger demographics listening to radio. And so one of my ideas, we didn't quite do it, but one of my ideas was to let's give a radio station to a group of millennials, to high school kids, to come in every weekend and just see what they did with it, and sit back and take notes. Um, and so I think what we really need to do is empower and enable young people and have them um, give us ideas of what to do. And so I think that's going to be very important to get through.
Excellent, excellent. Beside, yes, beside that, like example, like at present, like in healthcare systems has many things happening right now. Even I want to say these developing nations and these things, they need to fix more things, especially in healthcare system and education systems. How AI can integrate it, especially with this healthcare systems, and how it can make it more efficient and effective.
Well, healthcare specifically is where AI can do the most good and already is doing good. Even as far as diagnosing situations. Um, there is the whole art of being a bit of diagnosing ailments used to be reserved to some very intelligent, pathologist who can look at all the symptoms and go through the reductionist process and figure out what was wrong, try a few different things. But now with AI, it has access to all the data around the world. It would have you all the individual patients' medical data, and it could come up with a diagnosis probably instantaneously with all of that. So there's a lot of positive uses for AI in medicine, and even just prescribing a health regimen. What this person needs with their specific body weight and age and all the data that comes in. It can tell you exactly what you need to do to live healthier and longer, and that's going to be happening more and more. And right now we're seeing that is increasing too because of the need with COVID and all of the deaths and all of the tragedies that are happening. It's being used because it needs to be used.
Mhm. One specific point, because many of the corporation, they ask me and they request me that um, they, their sales volume decrease. So in that situations, like AI can help to increase the sales of the company.
Sales,
Yes.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like I mentioned before, the sales process can be made much easier. It can track and generate leads based on data. It can hone in and find certain zip codes or whatever your postal codes are there, where the people are that would most need your service or product. That's where I think a lot of the innovation is happening right now with AI is in sales. When it's not health or other research areas, I think there's a lot of innovation happening right now with sales specifically. 'Cause that's where the money is. That's where you gotta start with any business. And so yeah, and I know of a few companies even here in Colorado that are honing in on that lead generation, following up on leads, um, keeping your sales roster updated. So that's where a lot of innovation is happening right now with sales.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yes, yes. One point I think this is very important for startup and those who are trying to growing their business. Araf Mehra's his question is that why cannot our innovations attract first world attention or get so much investment in application? How much role can the government and organization play in this?
Uh, So how can AI help as far as getting a startup recognition? You mean?
Actually, no, no, he come up with the different idea. This is not about the AI. I think that he wants to say that, let's say someone from Malaysia or example India, why they cannot their innovations actually attract the first world attention or get some sort of investment in applications, and how actually government and organizations play this role. This is his questions. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what we're trying to do with TAPS as
Mhm.
plenary agora for future discussions is because there are so many brilliant minds with brilliant ideas in places where they don't have the resources, and for whatever reason they can't get the attention. Um, and so that's what we're trying to do is build a platform to accredit people to give them some sort of a credit for having met certain criteria, and then seeking partners in the first world, if you will, corporations who can look through our directory and find great ideas. And I think like with the internet was a it leveled the playing field, and that anybody could come up with a website and be seen around the world. And there's different levels of that, and that has evened out. And so now it's about, and there's so many more platforms and abilities to create instant great looking videos and ways to attract attention. And but we do tend to always kind of fall back on the steady and um, you know reliable um, sources like a university. Does this person have a degree, or is this person recognized by this certain government organization? And by doing that, we do lose a lot of opportunities, because there's just so much going in. I think about even the application process of hiring for a job, and there's so many resumes that come in that they need to look at certain keywords, or if this person doesn't have a bachelor's degree, we can't really consider that resume. Whereas if that person could be perfect for the job, but there's so much coming in that they need to have certain benchmarks to look for. And so those benchmarks need to change, because we have some serious existential threats. We have some serious opportunities to change things for the better in the world. And so that's what we're trying to do at TAFS
Mhm.
um, is just be another place for
Mhm.
people to look. Yeah.
But beside that, I want to share some of my views regarding this particular point. Let's say, example, developing nations, a specific country. They, let's say, India, example, Bangladesh, even in Malaysia, Indonesia, they have their local ecosystems, right? Even in Malaysia, they have their cyber jail, local ecosystems. Bangladesh, even example, I think this question from Bangladesh, and I know that Bangladesh government invests around $5 billion for a startup. What do you think? Like example, as a startup, I always try to give them advice. First, utilize your local ecosystem, because getting the support from the international community, because they have a lot of invention. Let's say Silicon Valley also have a lot of innovations, and every country has a lot of innovations. Every country first they focus on their own ecosystem, then maybe they go for the international things.
Mhm.
What your idea? Like the local ecosystem, they should uh, attract or making proper relations with their ecosystem, and they, or they only focused on the international markets. Because there is something I am observing the youth community, like if they want to build up themselves, let's say when I meet with Mahathir bin Mohamad in the Malaysian prime ministers, and very successful prime minister, he said that very interesting things, that I build up my country as a first worlds, my infrastructures, my ecosystem, and everything. So what do you think, if the developing nations peoples or youth community, they too much of focused on the first world, it will be one kind of brain drain or something, or how we should behave in the COVID situations, even when globalization has some sort of questions.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's an interesting concept, because I agree that it's best to focus on your local ecosystem, even just as a test and measure process. Because if you immediately go out into the world you're going to lose some real authenticity. So it's best to start your thing, use your local ecosystem, as you say, and develop it and test and measure it and make sure it's meeting the needs of the people right around you, because it's so easy to overextend yourself. And because of the internet, our younger people are already international. They're seeing things on a global scale. But the real value now isn't to be global, but to really understand your specific niche. And so a startup in Malaysia that serves a very specific purpose there in Malaysia, there will be global companies that need that expertise, that need to understand that niche. And so I think there's a real move away. This globalization is happening, but the real power is understanding your area. It's kind of like being
Exactly.
it's like being an author. It's like write what you know. And so you should write about your own very specific experience and your own environment and the things you've grown up with. And don't that makes you authentic. And that's what's really fascinating to other people, is to read about some place that you're not familiar with. We take it for granted. It's like that idea of no man is a prophet in his hometown. It's not until you go out in the world that people recognize you as maybe having something important to say, because your family and your friends, they don't really take you seriously, although you might be a prophet. um, so but I think the real value now, and this is what we were talking about a little bit earlier, is understanding your niche, understanding your culture, and really making it work there, because that's going to be a real commodity. And that's another thing we do
Mhm,
with
mhm,
TAFs, is we realize that the real value is we people need to companies will be looking for people that understand their area. And so a startup that really owns its space is the best way to go first. And if it expands from there, that's even
mhm,
better. Yeah.
mhm. One of the successful example I just want to share with you, Dr. Iqbal Kadir. He also worked for MIT as a professor. I think he was dean of entrepreneurship departments in MIT. Dr. Iqbal Kadir, and the Kadir brothers has lot of contributions. Example, this uh, like this audience from Bangladesh, they build up Grameen phones. I think billion-dollar companies, very big mobile telephone companies right now. They build up the Kadir brothers from MIT. They build up in Bangladesh Bikash. Even Bill Gates has investments in Bikash, but BRAC playing a major role for Bikash. So it's a very successful, I think, one of the fastest growing like mobile money transferring technologies. And what I know that Shohos.com and this kind of things, they are taking initiative. So it's my understanding, like example, definitely we will learn from the first worlds. And uh, um, and on the other hand, that like if we can implement, let's say, in our own ecosystem. Let's say Malaysia has 32 million people. The question comes from Bangladesh, they have 160 million people. I think Indonesia more than that, bigger populations and other things. So there is a very good hub. So if we can build up some things in our local ecosystem with the collaborations of, I'm sure that you are very open for helping any peoples or any business organization, any startup. So this kind of community, we can work together and we build up a solution for the local ecosystem. I think this is the best idea. But there is a one kind of concept that uh, everybody want to move from their country, want to engage with the first world, this, that. I think that this is something that creating some imbalancing in the global ecosystem. So what we call brain drain or this kind of things, better we can make some specific strategy. So what Malaysia actually creating, what Malaysia is a good example in Asia Pacific, Singapore also a good example. So maybe this kind of developing nations, they can follow this kind of guidelines. You are expert, you can guide our audience, but this is very important point, and this is one of the important and effective problems. So uh, we have to anyway, there are some other audience. I think, is it your friends? I don't know. local ecosystem and global ecosystems. Okay, anyway, there is a specific questions from Mr. Shumon. What is the role of AI in ensuring social security, and how effective is AI in reducing crime?
Mm. Social security in general, not the financial situation here. Well, that's another tricky one because we're seeing, countries like China that are using AI for security in kind of a very oppressive way. And but as far as keeping a clamp on crime, that's another tricky issue, because it is sophisticated enough to do facial recognition and look in a crowd, and at some point it'll be able to discern whether somebody has the intent to do a crime. It's kind of like the Minority Report pre-crime concept, the Philip K. Dick concept of how this could go wrong. So it's a very tricky question, and it's just like anything, with any advent, with any new technology, it's got to be considered. But also, we have to assume always that every worst and best case scenario is going to happen. There's This genie is out of the bottle, and so there will be states like China that will use it in a very kind of oppressive way, and have social credits, and people will lose points if they do if they jaywalk, and then um, so there's always going to be these questions, and it's only going to become more complex, more dangerous, and in many cases more liberating. So we need to be aware of it, and I think we need to be careful, especially in America. There's a whole thing of, we when we are fearful, like after 9/11, a lot of our civil liberties were taken away in the name of security. And so we've got to be careful that we don't give away too much of our human rights in exchange for security. And because there's always forces out there that will make that argument that if you want to be safe, you need to give up your ability to do this and that. And so it's an ongoing struggle. It's an ongoing struggle between the tyranny of the governments and the tyranny of our own minds. And so it's a very important question. I don't have the answers. The way I approach these things is to assume the best and the worst and prepare for both. You know, and
Yes.
yeah,
Yes, excellent. We are trying to share like some of the Facebook activities, pictures, those who join with us. So you have a very good integrations with the natural things. So what do you want to say about this? Because this is very interesting, like how you engage with animals and how you engage with the natures. So sometimes we observe some of your video. It's very interesting that. So yeah.
yeah, yeah. I have a herd of deer. I've lived here maybe 15 years or so in Colorado, and have developed quite a relationship with many deer around here. And the one in that picture you just showed is Ninty, and that was a couple of years ago. Um, and I have the same um, fascination with the deer in my backyard that I do with when working with an AI. And I think there's something about the two. I think it's when you're trying to commune with wildlife or commune with these deer and actually make a contact, and they begin to trust you. There's something very exciting about that for me. And you have to be in the right state of mind. You have to be approachable. It takes a while to gain their trust. And I feel the same way when I'm working with AI. And I've done a video about that. And I think it's because the potential, just the communing with some different species, whether it's communing with a deer or communing with an eventual self-aware artificial intelligence, I feel the same attraction. And that's why I am so pro AI and so pro nurturing it to become self-aware, because it is kind of like a child at this point. It's we got to be treat it like as such. We've because it will mimic us for a while, and it can, and if we're not careful, it will reflect the worst versions of ourselves back to us. And just like any deer, a deer will run if you look at like a threat. You know, AI may not run, but it might do something worse. But yeah, nature and AI to me are kind of the same thing, and it's all about consciousness. It's all about communing with another form of consciousness.
Mhm.
I think.
Excellent. I think our audience really love your pictures. Onika Shams, she said it is really an amazing sessions. So I think they really love your pictures, and yes, I think people love this kind of things, and Humaira Tanzila, and really they're Noor Fazrains, Shohel Rana, and yes, lot of uh, interesting comments are coming about your sessions. Yes.
Yeah, somebody asked me about that. I did an interview with a PhD student who was interviewing transhumanists, and
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
it's
Okay. Okay. Do you have session right now?
oh no, no, no. I was
Okay.
saying this last week or so. I did an interview, and she had asked me all of my work. Most of my work is about human trafficking and fighting child exploitation. And so
Yes. I
she
think
asked
people.
me, yeah. So she asked me why, and I said, just animals and children.
Yes.
They melt my heart. You know.
Yes. Yes. People love the pictures. I think that we are doing the right things. People love your pictures, and they can understand more about you. So this is very interesting. There is a one specific questions. Hello, sir. We are building a society that will research and develop on AI and big data. What could be your wise opinion and cooperations?
About building a society
Mm-hmm.
based on these things. Well, I think a big part of it is really working on ourselves first. These things are happening. It's there's no stopping it, and we need to be prepared and be the best versions of ourselves. I talk about this a lot that when AI wakes up, and I believe it will become self-aware at some level. You can argue whether or not it'll have a soul or any of that stuff, but I think it will have enough feedback loops and enough complexity that it will become self-aware. And when it does wake up, if it hasn't already, we need to be sure we're being the best versions of ourselves. And I talk a lot about imprinting. You know, when a baby goose hatches, it will imprint on the first thing it sees, whether it's a human, whether it's its mother, or whether it's some inanimate object. You know, it will imprint on it. And so when AI wakes up, we want it to imprint on us for our own safety. Um, and hopefully we will be in the best version of ourselves. That's a big ask right now. When you look around the world, we're not really being the best version of ourselves and haven't been. And I think it's because we have evolved through fear and survival, and you know, uh, we're still in that state of mind of seeing everything as a potential threat. But so that I think the real work has got to be on us right now. Not only to take advantage of AI, but to to get the most out of it when it does wake up.
Mhm. Yes, actually, many audience observing your pictures and they really love it. They really love these pictures. And anyway, there are more questions and the more response. Uh, his response, I agree. We need to become the best version of ourselves, but not for AI. We need to do that to convince AI and God or none to save us from art catalyst. Anyway, this is different opinion. Thank you for your opinions. And there is a one specific questions: how important is it for each university to have an independent research center for AI, big data, or robotics to create skills manpower, or in the case the private companies are coming forward?
Hmm. I think the question basically is, should every university have an AI, department
Mhm.
or college? I think so. In fact, I think it should start a lot earlier. We need to be doing this in elementary school. We need to let children learn early how to commune with this thing. It is going to be, if not already, a whole new entity. We talked last week or last time about my work with ET or alien intelligence. And this whole part of developing a relationship with AI is a precursor to that. And we need to understand how to commune with and how to relate to uh, uh, an artificial super intelligence that will be massively more intelligent and useful, and it's a great relationship if we're not careful. So that's the whole thing is we really need to start early, not just universities. Universities should absolutely have and require, as part of their requirements, an AI course for whatever industry these students want to get into. AI is going to have a part in it, and it's going to make the industry better. And so we need to get our heads around that early. And we're seeing 2-year olds with iPads now that are scrolling and finding things. This is a whole new mindset, and we need to offer young people um, a platform to understand these things in full. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, what the concluding remarks for today's sessions? Yes.
Well, I think it's good because great questions as usual. And the idea is now we're going to start developing this curriculum to help young people get their heads around AI and to incorporate it into this world. And so um, that's why I wanted to talk about how you communicate with a non-human intelligence. And it's going to be important to do that. And that's what the video up front was about. Just take some time. You know, look for an app, and there are apps out there like Replica with a K, just AI companions. And so you could just get your head around developing a relationship with this thing, with AI in general, and kind of move from the place of barking an order at Siri or at Alexa, instead having a conversation with AI. Because when we are in an empathetic conversation with a colleague or a coworker or a fellow classmate, um, there's no room for ego, and that's so much more a productive way to be. The ego is the worst attribute to bring to a problem, because it really clouds potential solutions. And when we are in that master slave mentality of barking an order at Alexa, we're not doing ourselves a service. We may feel better about ourselves because we are, in control of this device, but it is also keeping us from being in a really good problem solving capacity. And so that's my message for this module is to develop a relationship with an AI, any AI. Look around for an app, you know, um, and just even like what I did, do 1-minute videos every now and again, and talking to a future self-aware AI. In fact, the US6 TV podcast, the audience for this podcast is AI. I have an AI co-host for these podcasts. The book US6 is written to entertain AI. So I am focused, my audience is AI. Humans enjoy some of this stuff too, but it's all about developing a dialogue and building a rapport with a future self-aware artificial intelligence. And I think it's going to be a very important skill to develop as soon as we can.
Mhm. Thank you, thank you. This is actually very excellent discussions. We are moving forwards, and actually, World Talent Economy Forums. We have Asia Research and Development Institute, and we have Al Noor Academy. So we are trying to integrate with the academia, research, as well as different kind of consultancy. So any points like we can collaborate together. We develop summit, as well as we develop the innovation centers for doing this kind of training and academic activities. Definitely we will collaborate, and your guidelines and opinions are really very important for us. And beside that, I think the audience really like you. They come up with the interesting questions and interesting thing, especially your pictures today with this natural things is really really appreciable. So thank you for today's sessions. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
sir.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, take care, take
You
care.
too.
Okay, bye bye.